Is it just me, or is this chessable jacket a little bit strange? I quite like it, but seeing 3 labels on camera is kind of... Well, anyway, it's a cool jacket. Thanks, Chessable. Okay, so in this game, we're going to be covering between Anatoly Karpov and Viktor Korchnoi from the Candidates Tournament 1974. This is an important tournament who would decide who would play Bobby Fischer for the World Championship. Since Fischer defaulted, Karpov went on to win and just won the World Championship by default. So for all practical purposes, this is a critical game in the World Championship. Let's get started. So e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6. I'm just gonna skip ahead mostly. By the way, I did mention the critical idea in this typical position that black tends to have two plans, either knight e5, knight c4, and white's gonna follow the typical plan of pawn storming, or knight takes d4 and b5, trying to play for an immediate pawn storm, and we're going to get back to that. But the main idea here for black is that he gets the pawn storm in first, and he exchanges so that white can't capture on b5. The idea is that black's pawn storm is a bit faster, and as a result, white tends to prefer to play directly in the center instead of pawn storm. We'll get back to this. But unless black goes for this plan, generally speaking, that's exactly what we're going to try to do. Open the H file. Okay, so h4, rook c8. Black maybe should have played h5 to stop white from doing that. But in these positions, white often will sacrifice with something like trying to figure out how to get the exact order. Like there's a typical idea g4 and h5. White usually prefers to have the king on b1 when this happens, but the gist of it is you want to have open files for your rooks. You already have the open diagonal for your bishop. You can exchange off with bishop h6, and it's a very dangerous attack. We're going to be covering the details later. Okay, so rook c8, bishop b3, knight e5, castles. Okay, white could also play h5, knight c4. Black could have stopped it with h5. Well, hold on a second here. What's all this talk about h5? Isn't this pawn defended? Well, basically no, that's the thing. I would almost always be willing to make this type of sacrifice, and I would even consider h4 to h5 to be a threat, even as a pawn sacrifice that is worth defending in general. And my reason for this is in positions where you have a dynamic advantage, material is not going to be as important because you're going to be trying to checkmate the opponent first. And right here, black is going to be playing on the queen side, white's playing on the king side. In typical Sicilians like this, it should be a race for checkmate. And while I agree that white could play something slow to prepare this, like g4 or king b1, there's no reason not to play the immediate the immediate h5, because the checkmating idea will be far too strong, and after something like knight takes h5, g4, there's going to be lots of pressure on the open file. And now white has lots of moves that he could play here. This is actually probably a pretty instructive position, so I would recommend that you pause the video here and think about what you would like to play. Okay, in the game, white played knight de2. Okay, by the way, there's lots of strong moves here. There's lots of moves. I just love this position. It's so interesting. Okay, and here's... Okay, it's just a rich position. So there's the flexible king b1, which is always okay. And here's, like, actually a concrete reason why king b1 is often a good idea. Like, let's say white had done something else, like something typical like castles, rook c8, bishop b3, knight e5, bishop h6, bishop takes h6, queen takes h6. Black would have a very strong idea here. I would like you to pause and try to find it. I hope that you found the black idea. The black idea is rook takes c3, and the idea behind this sacrifice, well, there's a few ideas. The first one is, this is not a sacrifice. A rook is supposedly worth 5, and a knight is worth about 3 or 3.5, right? So you're going to be down a pawn and a half worth of material or so. That's just basically not true. Not true because you're going to win the pawn back, for one thing. And for another thing, the pawn structure is damaged. And this is a long-term advantage, and the king is weak. And what I mean by it's not true, it's like, yes, it was a sacrifice, but what I mean is that white has a static advantage. That's not true. The compensation is of a general nature, and this type of rook takes c3 sacrifice is one of the key ideas in the Sicilian, even when white castles kingside, and it also prepares the d5 break in a lot of lines. Black can choose between either pawn storming or just trying to win the pawn back through development, and in my opinion, black is getting relatively good chances. Admittedly, it's not so clear because white does still have play down the h-file, but at least from the static perspective, this type of sacrifice is quite strong for black. And so as a result, Karpov wanted to prevent it. That's the idea behind this move, knight de2. The idea is you want to protect your knight so that you can play bishop h6. And the other idea is if you play the immediate bishop h6, then knight takes e4 might be annoying with some discovered attacks. Okay, but this is still playable for white, and actually Kasparov has played white in this position among other grandmasters, but I don't see the need to go for complications when there's a clear weakness down the h-file. There's no rush. Knight d2 is quite strong. Okay, there's other slow moves too, and I don't think black should go for this position. I believe he should have prevented h5 himself by blocking h4 with h5 before white had a chance. But anyways, knight de2, protecting. Black played queen a5. Bishop h6 was played. Bishop takes h6 was played. Maybe even stronger is the typical sacrifice, bishop h8. Because in general, the dark square bishop is stronger than the rook in the dragon. White would still be better though. I'm not wanting to focus on every detail of this game. I just want to show the key ideas. White had multiple ways to play for a win, but now there were brilliant tactics. G5, the idea to remove the defender for the knight, and rook takes g5 was played in the game. If knight h5 was played, then white could play knight f4, and after knight takes f4, there would be checkmate in 2 moves. So let's say rook takes g5. Now rook d5, removing the defender, knight takes, and this goes back to the plan earlier of just sack, mate, went on the h-file, and now the knight's being removed by force, so rook e8, and okay, black's being a bit sneaky, because if takes, he gets to run with the king. The king postulate, after all, but, okay. But then white just found the strong move knight 4, which the idea is to replace the knight, and then control the e7 square, not letting the king out of the kill zone, Jacob Agard's concept, attacking manuals. Okay, bishop c6, and then there's one final tactic. This would have been a cool idea, but at minimum, black can sort of sack the queen, and Ferguson Gambit, when in doubt, sack the queen, giving back material. Oh, for crying out loud. Hold on a second here. Sorry about that. Actually, it'd be really funny. I'll re-record if Chessable asks me to, but I think it's funny that the phone interrupted there. Anyways, queen g5 check would exchange the queens, and, well, not when exchange the queens. White wins the queen, and I thought white would be winning here, but Teamer sort of suggested this is not a fortress. Black has lots of pawns for the piece. Black is doing totally fine. So, for that reason, instead, white plays this move e5, and the idea is it's interference on the h-file. If black takes on e5, then you could take on f6, takes, and then knight h5 with the idea, well, you're playing for checkmate for one thing, but the idea is that you're just breaking through for mate. And this is actually a really, really typical thing. It reminds me once again of Jacob Agard's principles. It's like 3-piece rule. Colin, Crouch, and Agard, it was like you need 3 pieces to have a successful attack. 1 to sacrifice and 2 to give mate. Okay, so black plays bishop takes d5 and then takes, and black resigns here because after king e7, takes, rook e1, black is losing the rook and the game. The key idea of this game is the h4, h5 plan and how black should prevent this type of sacrifice. And I would also add implicitly the rook takes c3 sacrifice as a key idea. And actually one thing I didn't emphasize during the game is rook d3 was to prevent black from sacrificing 2 exchanges. Whether this is a threat or not is a whole nother question, but Karpov thought it serious enough to prevent. Okay, on to the next game. Okay, in this game, this is a game where black is playing for the rook takes c3 sacrifice. And it's just to show how things can go wrong for white. Bishop h6, careful. It's the right plan, but you don't want to create a worse weakness than black did, right? If you exchange these bishops off, yeah, they have a couple weaknesses, but if they play rook takes c3, then your king is actually weaker than theirs, and white's not doing too great. I mean, white's actually okay, but it's still not that fun to play this position, and in general, I like black in these positions, and even in the endgame, because there's a pawn for the exchange and the initiative, and white rooks do not have open files. So, yeah, black is a little better, and he went on to win. I don't like playing white in these positions. By the way, I really want to talk about this, because it's not 5 against 3. It's not 5 against 3 in terms of material, because this is a really, really, really important idea. Minor pieces are not worth 3 points, and rooks are not worth 5 points relative to each other in terms of this exchange. I would rather say minor pieces are worth 3.5. and maybe even more than that regarding typical exchange sacrifices. And here's why. In the opening, the minor pieces are usually very active controlling the center, and the rooks don't usually have a lot of open files. Therefore, the rooks are less valuable than they would be in the endgame after lots of exchanges, and the minors are more valuable, often also representing a lead in development. So therefore, just at minimum, the minors are often at their best and the rooks are often at their worst, relatively speaking. I'm trying to say that I'm trying to justify why it's 3.5, roughly speaking. The pawn structure makes it at least 4. Winning a pawn makes it at least 5. So even in these endgames, is it like a pawn for the exchange? Well, for me, I see this position as essentially very close to material equality, if not actual material equality. And material for me is like a substitute for who has a static advantage. But for me, I see black as the one having a static advantage. And this is typical. It's really, really, really important to get this idea down. In the Sicilian, the rook takes c3 sacrifice is the key idea you need to watch out for, and it is often justified without tactics. So this is a game between Movsevian and Kasparov from 2000, and it's a really, really, really important a game to show the point of the rook takes c3 sacrifice. This is a Najdorf, that doesn't matter. The whole point is rook c3 is a threat. It's a threat when white castles queenside, even without any tactics to justify it. And I think it was Movsevian, a very strong grandmaster at the time, didn't know this. And he actually prepared this position for white. By the way, I'm not meaning anything bad against Movsevian. This was a game from 20 years ago, so it's totally justified that he wouldn't know it. I mean, I didn't know it back then. I wasn't even born yet. So anyways, I think he prepared this as white and even played several training games in the white position against Von Welly and Blitz, if I recall correctly. But Kasparov's intuition was justified. Rook takes c3 is a threat that should have been prevented, and I think Van Welly's always like playing d5, and he's like, well, I mean, I sacked the exchange, right? I gotta prove it. No, you don't have to prove it. Develop, develop, develop. Objectively, black is basically winning. The engine will back this up even from the beginning. And the attack just worked out eventually because white had weaknesses and the rooks didn't have open files. I don't want to go about the details. You can find the details for this game anywhere. It's Movsevian versus Kasparov 2000. Okay, and well, technically it's basically mate, but the key idea, rook c3 is a threat. Is a threat when white castles queenside, even without tactics. Even if you're only playing eventually. Make sure to watch out for it. If you watch out for it, you're usually doing fine. One of the reasons why white plays king b1 in the dragon is to make sure that rook c3 comes with less effect. You can sometimes afford to allow rook c3 when your h-pawn shove is coming fast enough because you actually have files for your rooks. But still. No, actually, let's talk about that. I'm going to take a break because there's this, yeah, I know this is some Larson game, but I got to show some idea. So, where was the idea? What idea am I trying to talk about again? It was these positions. No, it's not. No, it's not. I got to find the exact position. Something like castles, rook c8, knight e5, king b1, king b1. Well, what's the concept behind king b1? Well, the concept behind king b1, okay, I'm not going to play bishop h6 here. I'm going to play h4 and g4 and h5 and maybe not g4. And I really don't want to allow this sacrifice because black gets counterplay. But the idea is I don't want them to have queen a1 check and then take the knight because my king will be on c1. Wait, where's the position where that's relevant? I want to get exact. Okay, let's see. Castles, rook c8, bishop b3, knight e5, king b1, knight c4, takes. No, not knight c4. This is rook e8, h4, h5, g4, takes, h5, bishop h6, e6, rook g1, and if black had played something like this with queen a5, this could be a threat in some positions. So king b1 is the most flexible move. And, yeah, I guess also king b1 is the most flexible move here because, let's say after takes, if black takes on h6, then there's no queen f4 check. So you get off of the open diagonal and you get off of the open file. There's a lot of positions where this is relevant. When in doubt, just play king b1. Like, seriously, it's the most flexible move by far. You can't go wrong, especially when there isn't tactics happening. Okay, but anyways, just thought I'd point that idea out. Okay, Fischer versus Larson. Played in the 1958 Interzonal. Knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6. Ah, nice quote from Fischer. Larson was one of those diehards who refused to abandon the dragon until recently. White's attack almost plays itself. Weak players even beat grandmasters with it. I once thumbed through several issues of the Shmakdri Bulletin when the Yugoslav attack was making its debut and found the ratio was something like 9 wins out of 10 in White's favor. Bobby Fischer, my 60 memorable games. Alright, bishop e3, bishop g7. So in this game, black took on d4. And I think this is somewhat justified, but white gets a better center, so I kind of like these positions for white. I think Anish Giri actually tried to revive them recently. Um, Tried to show how black is holding some worse endgame here. We can talk about that later. But anyways, I don't want to talk about the theory because black actually had decent position out of the opening. If he played it well, I'm just, he had to play very aggressively. So anyways, white's idea is to play h4, h5, rook c8, knight takes h5, bishop takes g7, g4, and it's just checkmate. Very, 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 very typical. h4, h5, even without g4. Notice how Fischer did this. Also, Fischer and Karpov, you don't need to play g4. Bishop takes g7, knight takes is going to lead to mate, king takes g4. And just note, this bishop on b3, pinning that f7 pawn. Power of a pin, like, what was it again? The defensive power of a pin piece is purely illusory, as Nimzovich would say in my system. Anyways, h takes, check, king h8, queen h6, and checkmate. It's a fake queen sacrifice too, so lose the king. So white just blasted open, everything's defended, and you just break through. Typical sacrifice. No one cares about material. We're here to checkmate the opponent. And there were concrete details, but they don't matter because black's king was really exposed, and you just busted open with tactics. There's probably lots of ways to win. The key idea that I want to emphasize is h4, h5, even without sacrificing with g4, as well as the pin so that you can break through with g6 later. The key move I want to show here would be pawn to g6. Alright, on to the next game. Also, for any of these games, please ask questions in the comments if you're unsure about anything. I'm just trying to show the key ideas. Okay, another Fischer game against Edward Stevens. This is in the US Open 1857. Yeah, Fischer was pretty good back then. So basically, black played a bunch of slow moves. I've seen a bunch of people play moves like this. The problem is black is barely holding on in the mainline dragon anyway, if he's even holding on at all. Like, if he survives, it's because of a tempo, and white's attack just plays itself, so you can't play slowly in the dragon. You just can't get away with it. So, anyways, black tried something like this, but now there were tactics, and, well, knight d5, and oops, now there's play on the diagonal. And I've seen this motif so many times in the Sicilian, where black puts a knight on c6 and then plays b5, and then the queen gets exposed. And, well, right now, white's threatening to win the queen, and white's threatening to take the knight and play bishop d5, and also white be threatening to fork the queen and rook, and threatening to fork everything, and threatening a skewer. So it's pretty good. Not to mention that there's always this plan. So king h8. Yeah, black just realized how crushed he is. White could also even have gone back, which is kind of funny. And yeah, black could resign because he's down a piece, and being down a piece is pretty bad. But he decided to wait a few moves because losing instantly is probably not exactly how you want to be published in a magazine. Okay, so there's another game, Anand Grigoriev. Okay, what happened in this game? Black played a little slowly. White could have played h4, h5 right away, but he didn't. Black's slow play didn't work. h5 would have been strong, but like black preventing it was a little too late because white has that pawn on g4 already. And the gist of it is it's just a breakthrough and completely winning because you have a lot of open files and black has a lot of weaknesses and only one defender, which you will exchange very soon. A lot of ways to play. White can play slowly, white can play quickly. It doesn't matter. I mean, just lots of weaknesses eventually. White can sacrifice 2 or 3 pawns for this type of attack, and it's still strong. So, still winning generally. So, black sacrificed to try to get out and didn't work because his position was terrible. And I'm just going through this really fast, but I mean, in the theory section, we're going to see all sorts of concrete attempts for black to drum up something really, really fast. But my point is, he does need to do something really fast because otherwise white's attack is too easy. And even grandmasters have messed this up pretty seriously, especially in the older games when they didn't know the theory. And like for the longest time, the dragon was out of fashion because black would just get crushed and crushed and crushed, and he'd always need something concrete to escape. And well, Maybe he has it, maybe he doesn't. But in the meantime, White's plan is pretty easy. Hopefully you'll apply these ideas in your own games. To recap, before we head on to the theory section, the move g6 creates a weakness, allowing the h4, h5 push. You want to exchange the dark squared bishops, but not when you get the exchange sacrificed on you. The king generally goes to b1, and black is the one who needs to prove that he's surviving.